day. I am Crystal Claire C. Agustin, team leader of Group 1, and today we will be discussing our answers in Worksheet 7 entitled Endocrine, Digestive, Urinary, and Reproductive Systems.
Good morning, everyone. I am Ryan Edward, and I will be reporting the functional anatomy of the endocrine glands. So first is the gross anatomy and basic function of the endocrine glands. Number 1. The endocrine and nervous systems are major regulating systems of the body. However, the nervous system has been compared to an airmail delivery system, and the endocrine system to the Pony Express. Briefly explain this comparison. So the nervous system employs electrochemical impulses to bring about rapid control, whereas the endocrine system is more slowly acting with hormones. Number 2, define hormone. Hormone is a chemical substance secreted by endocrine tissues into the blood that acts on the target tissue to produce a specific response. Number 3, identify the endocrine organ described by the following statements. It is located in the throat, bilobe gland connected by an isthmus. Our answer is thyroid gland. Number 2, found atop the kidney is the adrenal glands. 3, a mixed gland located close to the stomach and small intestine is the pancreas. It is found in the roof of the third ventricle of the brain is the pineal gland. The right horseback on the thyroid gland is the parathyroid gland, and found in the pelvic cavity of the female, concerned with ova and female hormone production, are the ovaries. Number 4. Although the pituitary gland is often referred to as the master gland of the body, the hypothalamus exerts some control over the pituitary gland. How does the hypothalamus control both anterior and posterior pituitary functioning? So it releases both releasing and inhibiting hormones, which control the production and release of the anterior pituitary hormones. It forms hormones ADH and oxytocin, which are then transported to the posterior pituitary and released by a nervous stimulation directed from the hypothalamus. Number 5. Name the hormone whose production in inadequate amounts result in the following conditions. Poor development of secondary sex characteristics results to are estrogen and testosterone. Tetany for tetany is the parathyroid hormone or PTH. For diabetes, mellitus is insulin. Abnormally small stature, normal proportions is the growth hormone. Lastly, the myxedema or a lower than normal metabolic rate is the thyroid hormone. For each statement describing hormonal effects, identify the hormones involved by choosing a number from key A and note the hormone site of production with a letter from key B. So for number 1, basal metabolism hormone is the T4 and T3, which is secreted by the thyroid gland. For number 2, it regulates blood calcium levels. These are the calcitonin and PTH, which are secreted by the thyroid gland and the parathyroid glands. Number 3, it helps mature T lymphocytes is the thymus and thymosin. Number 4, drive development of secondary sexual characteristics. For female, it is for estrogen, which is secreted by the ovaries, and for male, is the testosterone hormone, which is secreted by the testes. Number 5, it regulates the function of another endocrine gland. So the hormones are LH, ACTH, TSH, and FSH, which are secreted by the anterior pituitary. Number 6, it mimics the sympathetic nervous system. The hormone is epinephrine and it is secreted in the adrenal medulla. Number 7, regulated blood glucose levels produced by the same mixed gland. The hormones are insulin and glucagon, which is secreted by the pancreas. Directly responsible for regulating the menstrual cycle is the hormone is progesterone and estrogens, and then they are secreted by the ovaries. For number 9, it helps maintain salt and water balance in the body fluids are the aldosterone and adrenal ADH, which then are secreted by the adrenal cortex and the hypothalamus. Lastly, involved in milk ejection, the hormones are prolactin and oxytocin, and then they are secreted by the anterior and posterior pituitary. Now, we'll move on to the observing the effects of hyperinsulinism. Now, briefly explain what was happening within the fish body when the fish was immersed in the insulin solution. The fish began undergoing insulin shock. As the insulin was absorbed into the bloodstream through the gills, it opened up more glucose pathways in the fish cell walls, causing glucose levels in the bloodstream to drop. This reduced the amount of glucose available for the brain, leading to tremors, coma, and eventual death. So, what is the mechanism of the recovery process you observe? I, the answer is glucose was added to the solution to increase the glucose levels in the body and in order to reverse the effects of insulin solution to the fish body. 9. What would you do to help a friend who had accidentally taken an overdose of insulin? So I would advise them to eat food with high carbs and or drink a glass of orange juice or any soda because insulin lowers the blood sugar and you need to bring it back up with more sugar in order to balance the blood sugar in the body. And last but not the least, what is a glucose tolerance test? A glucose tolerance test is a lab test used to check how our body breaks down sugar. A glucose tolerance test is used to determine a person's ability to handle a glucose load. The test can show whether a person can metabolize a standardized measured amount of glucose, and the results can be classified as normal, impaired, or abnormal. And that's all for observing the effects of hyperinsulinism. Thank you.
Internal anatomy of the digestive system. The digestive system. Division of the digestive system. Number 1. Match each division of the digestive system with the statements that apply to each. Number 1. Alimentary tube. The answer is A, C, F, and G. Number 2. Accessory organs. The answer is B, D, and E. Number 2. Name the parts of the alimentary tube in which digestion takes place. Oral cavity, stomach, and small intestine. Name the part of the alimentary tube in which most absorption of the nutrient takes place. Small intestine. Number 4. Label the parts indicated. Number 1. Hard palate. Number 2. Oral cavity. 3. Tongue. 4. Sublingual gland. 5. Submandibular gland. 6. Parotid gland. 7. Liver. 8 and 9. Gallbladder. 10. Common bile duct. 11. Duodenum. 12. Ascending colon. 13. Jejunum. 14. Small intestine. intestine, 15 cecum, 16 ileum, 17 esophagus, 18 diaphragm, 19 stomach, 20 transverse colon, 21 pancreas, 22 large intestine, 23 descending colon, 24 rectum, 25 anus. Esophagus. Types of digestion and end product of digestion. Number 1. Chemical digestion, PNC. 2. Mechanical digestion, AND. 2. Name the end product of digestion. Fats, fatty acid and glycerol. 2. Proteins, amino acid. 3. Carbohydrate, simple sugars. 3. Other nutrients released during the digestion process are vitamins, mineral, and water. Next is oral cavity and pharynx. Number 1. A. The opening for food into the oral cavity is the mouth. B. The superior boundary of the oral cavity is the hard palate. 2. Both the teeth and the tongue contribute the mechanical digestion in the oral cavity by what we call modification. Number 3. An individual develops two sets of teeth. The first set is called the primary or baby teeth and if complete consists of 20 numbers of teeth. B. The second set is called the permanent or adult teeth and if complete consists of 32 numbers of teeth. Number 4. Match the following parts of tooth with a proper description. Number 1. Enamel, CNE. 2. Dentine, A. 3. Pulp cavity, F. 4. Periodontal membrane, BNT. Next is number 5. The tongue is important for the sense of taste as the first step is in swallowing the tongue is elevated to push food toward pharynx. 6. Name the pairs of salivary glands with this location. Number 1. Below the floor of the mouth, sublingual glands. 2. In front of the ears, parotid glands. 3. At the posterior corners of mandible, submandibular glands. 7. The salivary glands are exocrine glands because they have ducts to take saliva to the oral cavity. 8. The digestive enzyme in saliva is salivary amylase, which digests starch to maltose. B. The water of saliva is important to dissolve food so that it may be tasted and to moisten a mass of food so that it may be swallowed. C. The enzyme is in saliva that inhibits the overgrowth of bacteria in the oral cavity is lysine. Next is number 9. The only eating-related function of the pharynx is swallowing, which is reflex regulated by a center in the medulla of the brain. Stomach. Number 1. The stomach is the esophagus. Number 1. The esophagus takes food from the pharynx to the stomach. Number 2. At the junction of the esophagus and the stomach is a cellular smooth muscle called the lower esophageal sphincter. Number Next is B. Contraction of sphincter prevents the back of stomach into the esophagus. Next is typical structure of the alimentary tube. Number 1. Mucosa A, D, and F. 2. Submucosa C and G. 3. External muscle layer E, H, and J. 4. Serosa V and I. Stomach. Number 1. The stomach is the sac-like portion of the alimentary tube that extends from the
esophagus to the small intestine. Number two, some digestion does take place in the stomach, which also serves as a reservoir for food so that digestion takes place gradually. 3. A. The folds of the gastric mucosa that are present when the stomach is empty are called rugae. B. The glands of the stomach are called gastric teats and their secretion is called gastric juice. Number 4. Match the cells of the gastric juice with their proper secretion. 1. Mucous cells. C. 2. Shaft cell. A. 3. Auricle cell. B. 4. G cell. T. 5. A the part of gastric juice that kills most microorganisms that enter the stomach is hydrochloric acid. B. The part of gastric juice that digests proteins to polypeptides is the pepsin. 6. Secretion of gastric juice may begin with the sight or smell of food. This is a parasympathetic response. B. When food actually reaches the stomach, the enteroendocrine cell of gastric will secrete the hormone gastrin, which stimulates the secretion for more gastric juice. 7. Mechanical digestion in the stomach is a function of the external muscle layer of the wall of the stomach. B. The pyloric sphincter is located at the junction of pylorus of the stomach and the duodenum of the small intestine. C. When the pyloric sphincter contracts, it prevents the backup of food from the duodenum to the stomach. Liver and gallbladder. Number 1A. The liver is located just below the diaphragm in the upper right and center of the abdominal cavity. B. The function unit of the liver is called a liver lobule, which is made of liver cell, and the large capillaries called sinusoids. C. Between liver lobules are branches of the hepatic artery, the portal vein, and bile ducts. 2A. The digestive function of the liver is the production of bile, which contains bile salts, the emulsify fats. B. This is an aspect of mechanical digestion. 3. Bile leaves the liver through the hepatic duct, which join the cystic duct of the gallbladder to form the common bile duct, which carries bile to the duodenum of the small intestine. 4. Bile also has an excretory function because bilirubin and excess cholesterol are transported to the intestine to be eliminated in feces. 5. The gallbladder is located on the undersurface of liver. B. State the two function of the gallbladder: stores bile and concentrates bile. 6. The production of bile and contraction of the gallbladder are regulated by hormones produced by the enteroendocrine cells of the mucosa of the duodenum. B. The hormone secretin stimulates production of bile by the liver. C. The hormone cholecystokinin stimulates contraction of the gallbladder. 7. Label the parts indicated. Number 1. Gallbladder. 2. Cystic duct. 3. Common bile duct. 4. Duodenum. 5. Major duodenal papilla. 6. Left lobe. 7. Common bile duct. 8. Stomach. 9. Pyloric sphincter. 10. Pancreas. 11. Pancreatic duct.
The pancreas is located in the upper abdominal cavity between the duodenum on the right and the spleen on the left. Number 2, pancreatic juices are carried by the main pancreatic duct to the pancreatic viaduct to the duodenum, which is their site of action. Number 3, enzyme pancreatic juice contains several enzymes. The enzyme pepsin enzyme digests polypeptides to shorter chains of amino acids. The enzyme lipase enzyme digests emulsified fats to free fatty acids and monoglycerides. The en- C. The enzyme amylases digest starch starch to disaccharides. Number 4, bicarbonate pancreatic juice contains sodium bicarbonate that neutralizes the hydrochloric acid from the duodenal lumen in the stomach. Small intestine number 1. The small intestine is cold within the abdominal cavity and is encircled by the large intestine. Letter B. The small intestine carries food from the stomach to the large intestine. Number 2. The three parts of the small intestine in order are the first part, called the duodenum, connects to the stomach. Number 2, the middle part is the jejunum, and the third part, called ileum, attaches to the colon. Letter B, the common bile duct enters which of these parts are duodenum. Number 3, which layer of the wall of the small intestine is responsible for mixing chyme with digestive secretions and for peristalsis? And the answer is muscularis layer. For letter B, what is the collective name for all of the nerve fibers and networks of the alimentary tube? The answer is enteric nervous system. For letter C, the name Peyer's patches is given to the lymph nodules of the small intestine. Number 4, digestion of food is completed in the small intestine and requires bile from the liver, pancreatic juice from the pancreas, and enzymes produced by the small intestine itself. For the number 5A, the crypts of Lieberkühn are the glands of the small intestine. For letter B, the secretion of these glands is stimulated by the presence of food in the duodenum. For 6A, the digestive enzymes produced by the small intestine are sucrase, maltase, and lactase, which digest maltase to glucose. For 6B, peptidases complete Peptidase complete the digestion of peptide chains to amino acids. For 7, number 1, Plica circularis. Our answer is letter A. For number 2, villi. Our answer is letter B. And for number 3, microvilli. Our answer is letter C. Number 8, the villi of the small intestine contain the vessels into which the end products or nutrients of digestion are absorbed. Each villus contains a capillary network which absorbs the water-soluble nutrients and a bile which absorbs the fat-soluble nutrients. For 9, number 1, amino acids, our answer is 1, active transport. For 9, number 2, fat-soluble vitamins, our answer is number 4. For 9, number 3, water-soluble vitamins, our answer is number 2, passive transport. For 9, number 4, fatty acids and glycerol, our answer is number 1, active transport. For number 5, 9, number 5, monosaccharides, our answer is active transport, number 1. For 9, number 6, positive ions, our answer is active transport, number 1. For 9, number 7, our answer is number 4, requires bile salts. For 9, number 8, water, our answer is number 3, osmosis. For number 10A, the absorption of vitamin B12 requires the parathyroid factor produced by the stomach lining. For 10B, the absorption of calcium ions requires vitamin D and parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid hormone. For 11A, blood from the capillary networks in the small intestine travels through the portal vein to the liver before returning to the heart. For 11B, lymph from the lacteals in the small intestine enters the blood in the subclavian vein.
For review of digestion food type, we have 4 columns: the organs, carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. These are the different digestive secretion and action of each organ listed below. For salivary glands, we have the amylase for carbohydrates, which digest starch to maltose. For fats, we have lingua lipase, which breaks down fats, and for proteins, none. For stomach, for carbohydrates, we have none. For fats, we have none. And for proteins, we have pepsin, serves to digest proteins found in ingested food. For the liver, we have pancreatic amylase, which completes the digestion of carbohydrates. Next, we have for fats, we have bisalts, breaks down larger fat globules in food into a small droplets of fat. And for proteins, we have none. For pancreas, we have the pancreatic amylase for carbohydrates, which completes the digestion of carbohydrates. For fats, we have lipase, which digests emulsified fats to fatty acids and glycerol. For proteins, we have trypsin, chymotrypsin, and carboxypeptidase, which required for proper protein digestion. And for the small intestine, we have the pancreatic amylase for carbohydrates, which it breaks starch down to small oligosaccharides. And for fats, we have none. And for proteins, we have peptidases, which is capable of catalyzing the hydrolysis of protein substrate and breaking it down into a smaller polypeptides or amino acids. Two, for number two, for salivary glands, we have the salivary amylase. For number two, we have pancreatic amylase. For number three, we have disaccharides. For number four, we have lingual lipase. Number five, we have the pancreatic lipase. Number six, pepsin, which breaks down protein. Number seven, trypsin, chymotrypsin, and carboxypeptidase. And for number eight, we have peptidases. For the large intestine, number one. The large intestine is also called the colon and extends from the ileocecal junction of the small intestine to the anus. For number two, the first part of the colon is the cecum, to which the appendix is attached. For number three, number the parts of the large intestines in order. Number one, we have cecum. Number two, ascending colon. Number three, transverse colon. Number four, descending colon. Number five, sigmoid colon. Number six, rectum. And lastly, number seven, anal canal. For number four, the functions of the colon are number one, the absorption of ingestible food, indigestible food, water, and salts. Number two, the elimination of feces. Number five, the normal flora or microbiota of the colon are the colonic bacteria that lives in the colon. B. One function of the colon flora is to inhibit the growth of microorganisms. Another function of the colon flora is to produce vitamin K, especially acids. Number six, the defecation reflex for the elimination of feces involves which parts of the CNS? The parasympathetic. Letter B, the stimulus for defecation is stretching of the rectum as peristalsis of the colon pushes feces into it. Number seven, number the parts of reflex arc for the defecation reflex in proper sequence. Number one, stretch receptors in the rectum generate impulses. Number two, sensory impulses travels to the spinal cord. Number three, motor impulses return to the smooth muscles of the rectum. And lastly, number four, the rectum contracts and the internal anal sphincter relaxes. Number eight, voluntary control of the defecation is provided by the defecation reflex which contracts to close the anus. Number 9. Following the diagram depicts the colon. Number 1, we have transverse colon. Number 2, we have ostra. Number 3, Datene coli. Number 4, right colic or hepatic flexure. Number 5, ascending colon. 6, ileum. 7, ileocecal valve. Number 8, appendix. Number 9, cecum. Number 10, splenic flexure. Number 11, descending colon. Number 12, sigmoid colon. Number 13, rectum. Number 14, anal canal. And lastly, the anus. The liver and other functions. Number 1, transamination. The answer is J. Glycogen, we have I. Synthesis of clotting factors, we have H. Number 4, beta oxidation, G. Number 5, ADP. E, K, and B12 is M. Number 6, fructose and galactose, B. Synthesis of albumin, A. Synthesis of enzymes, L. Deamination, E. Number 10, synthesis of lipoproteins, we have C. Number 11, synthesis of bilirubin, D. Number 12, cholesterol, F. Number 13, iron and copper, N. Number 14, Kupffer cells, K.
Hey, I am Crystal Claire C. Agustin, and today I will be discussing our answers and crossword puzzle. Now, for across, number 3, blank amino acids cannot be synthesized by the liver. The answer is essential. 8, bile salts do this to large fat globules. The answer is emulsify. Number 10, secretion of the parotid glands. Our answer is saliva. And 11, blank flora, which is the bacteria that live in the colon. The answer is normal. And 12, it takes bile and pancreatic juice to the duodenum. The answer is common bile duct. Number 14, blank digestion. It is the physical breakdown of food. The answer is mechanical. And 16, the first 10 inches of the small intestine. The answer is duodenum. And 17, blank digestion accomplished by digestive enzymes. The answer is chemical. And 19, it prevents backup of fecal material into the ileum. It is the ileocecal valve. And 20, blank amino acids can be synthesized by the liver. The answer is non-essential. Now let's move on to the down in the crossword puzzle. Number 1, it anchors a tooth in its socket. The answer is the periodontal membrane. Number 2, involuntary response for elimination of feces. The answer is defecation reflex. And number 4, prevents backup of stomach contents. It only requires the initials, which is the LES. Number 5, it prevents backup of intestinal contents. The answer is pyloric sphincter. 6, inflammation of the liver. It often caused by viruses. The answer is hepatitis. 7, folds of the mucosa when the stomach is empty. The answer is rogue. Number 9, extends from the mouth to the anus. The answer is alimentary tube. And 13, inflammation of the appendix. The answer is appendicitis. And 15, folds of the mucosa of the small intestine. The answer is villi. And lastly, for the down, number 18, it provides a hard chewing surface. Our answer is enamel. Now let's move on to the third part, which entitled The Functional Anatomy of the Urinary System. So for the first part of this section, which is entitled Gross Anatomy of the Human Urinary System. So for number 1, what is the function of the fat cushion that surrounds the kidneys in life? The fat cushion that identifies as called perennial fat capsules. And its function that surrounds the kidneys in life is that it anchors the kidneys to the dorsal body wall in a retroperitoneal position and cushions it against blows. And for number 2, we will be completing and labeling the diagram to correctly identify the urinary system organs. So as we can see, there is a diagram of the human urinary system. So there is inferior vena cava, adrenal gland, renal artery, aorta, iliac crest, rectum, uterus, urinary bladder, where it stores our waste, liquid waste, which is the urine. Urethra is the exterior organ which urine passes out from our body. We have the renal vein, the right kidney, and the ureter. So, for which of the structures identified above is applicable to the following statements? For number 1, it maintains water and electrolyte balance of the blood. It is the kidney. Number 2, it serves as a storage area for urine, as what I have mentioned. It is the urinary bladder. And number 3, it transports urine to the body exterior as we expel the urine from our body. It is the urethra. And number 4, it transports arterial blood to the kidney. It is the renal artery. And 5, it produces urine. It is kidney. Number 6, transports urine to the urinary bladder. It is the ureter. So from the kidney, it passes through the ureter to stores it in the urinary bladder, our urine. And lastly, 7, it is shorter in women than in men. So the urethra is more shorter than women than in men. Functional microscopic anatomy of the kidney. So number 4, we will match each of the lettered structures on the diagram of the nephron. Now, as you can see, there is a diagram of the nephron, and the labels were letters indicated on every part. So for number 1, it is the collecting duct. It is the letter E. Number 2, it is the glomerulus. It is the letter M. Number 3, it is a peritubular capillaries. It is on the letter J. Distal convoluted tubule for number 4, it is located in letter F. Number 5, proximal convoluted tubule is located in letter K. 6, cortical radiate artery is located in letter C. 7, arcuate artery, it is located in letter H. 8, cortical radiate vein is located in letter B. 9, efferent arteriole. It is located in letter A. Number 10, arcuate vein. It is located in letter I. Nephron loop. It is located in letter G. And 12, afferent arteriole. It is located in letter D. And lastly, for number 4, number 13, glomerular capsule. It is located in letter L. So sum number 5, using the terms provided in question 4. So identify the following. So all of the organs or part of the nephron that was mentioned before will be used in identifying what part is being indicated in the question 4, number 5. So from the first one, in question 1 in number 5, it is the site of filtrate formation. It is the glomerulus. Number 2, primary site of tubular reabsorption. It is the proximal convoluted tubule. 3, structure that conveys the processed filtrate or urine to the renal pelvis. It is the collecting duct. Number 4, blood supply that directly receives substances from the tubular cells. It is the peritubular capillaries. Glomerular capsule is the answer for number 5 because its inner visceral membrane forms part of the filtration membrane. So number 6, explain why the glomerulus is such a high pressure capillary bed. So all know that glomerulus is both fed and drained by arterioles, which are high pressure vessels compared to venules. So how does the high pressure help the glomerulus form filtrate? So the afferent arteriole has larger diameter than the efferent arteriole. And the higher the capillary pressure, the more filtrate will be formed. Number 7, what structural modification of certain tubule cells enhances their ability to reabsorb substances from the filtrate? So their possession of dense microvilli, especially the PCT cells, enhances their ability to reabsorb substances from the filtrate. Number 8, trace a drop of blood from time. It enters the kidney and to the renal artery, and it leaves the vein through the renal vein. So first, from the renal artery, it goes to the afferent arterioles, then to segmental arteries, then to interlobal arteries, then arcuate arteries, then it goes to interlobular arteries, afferent arterioles, glomerular capillaries, petribral capillaries or vesa recta, to the interlobular veins, to the arcuate veins, and to the interlobular veins, segmental veins, and lastly through the renal vein. So number 9, trace the anatomical pathway of a molecule of creatinine or metabolic waste from the glomerular capsule of the urethra. So we will note that each microscopic or gross structure it passes through in its travels and include the names of subdivision of the renal tubule. So glomerular capsule will go to the proximal convoluted tubule, to the loop of Henle, to the distal convoluted tubule, collecting tubule to the papillary duct, minor calyx, renal pelvis, ureter, bladder, and lastly the urethra.
Everyone, I am TRISHA BAUTISTA and I am gonna discuss the functional anatomy of the urinary system and the urinalysis characteristics of urine. Let's proceed to number 10. What is the normal volume of urine expected in a 24-hour period? We have zero point 0.8 to 2.0 liters, where the normal value ranges may vary slightly among different laboratory. Number 11. List 3 nitrogenous wastes that are routinely found in urine. We have the urea, creatine, and uric acid. The following up questions are list 3 substances that are absent from the urine healthy individuals. We have the blood, protein, and bile. The second following up question, list 2 substances that are routinely found in filtrate but not in the urine product. We have glucose and amino acid. Number 12, why urinalysis is a routine part of any good physical examinations? Well, it is part of the medical exam to screen for early sign of disease. Finding abnormal constituents in the urine may vary, indicate pathology. Well, for example, if you have a signs of diabetes or kidney disease, or to monitor you if you are being treated for these conditions, is to check your blood in your urine to diagnose a urinary tract infection. That's why it's needed. Number 13. What substances is responsible for the normal yellow color of our urine? We have urochrome. The yellow colorization of urine result from urobilin or urochrome that is produced as a product of bilirubin or degradation. Specifically, urobilinoligen, metabolized from the bile by intestinal bacteria, is reabsorbed and oxidized, producing urobilin that is the renally excreted. Moving on, we have number 14, which has a greater specific gravity, 1 ml of urine or 1 ml of distilled water. Well, the greater specific gravity is 1 ml of urine because the urine contains dissolved solutes which are not found in distilled water and add to the density of the sample. Okay, number 15, explain the relationship between the color, specific gravity, and volume of urine. Okay, generally, the smaller the volume, the greater the specific gravity or more solutes or volume, and the deeper the color. Okay, we moving on to abnormal urinary constituents. Number 16, how does urinary tract infections urine pH? Well, the answer is you can track the infection in our urine when it becomes alkaline. That's how you track the infection. Number 17. Several specific terms have been used to indicate the presence of abnormal urine constituents. Identify which urine abnormalities listed in column A might be caused by each of the conditions listed in column B. We have hematuria for blood in the urine, hemoglobinuria for hemolytic anemia, glycosuria, eating a 5 lb box of candy in one sitting, albuminuria for pregnancy, ketonuria for starvation, and pyuria for urinary tract infection. Number 18. What are renal calculi and what conditions favor the, their, their information? We have kidney stones, urinary retention, urinary tract infection, and alkaline urine. Number 19. What damage would you expect to occur in a urine sample that has been stored at room temperature? Well, you need to expect that the pH would change in a room that's stored at room temperature room. So that's all for the functional anatomy of the urinary system under the urinalysis characteristics of urine.
For the kidney internal structure, we have number 1, match each area of the kidney with the proper descriptive statements. Use each letter once, then 2 answer lines will have 3 correct letters and the other will have 2 correct letters. Number 1, renal cortex. Our answers are rather A, B, H. A cavity formed by the expansion of the ureter within the kidney at the hilus, also the outer layer of kidney tissue, and lastly, it contains the renal corpuscles and convoluted tubules of nephrons. Number 2, we have renal medulla. Our answers are C, F, G. The inner layer of kidney tissue consists of wedge-shaped pieces called renal pyramids. Lastly, it contains the loops of Henle and the collecting tubes of nephrons. Number 3, we have the renal pelvis. Our answers are D and E. The calyces are funnel-shaped extensions of this part and it is where urine enters from the papillae of the pyramids. Number 2, the following diagrams depict the frontal section of a kidney and the magnified wedge of kidney tissue. Label the parts indicated. So for the left picture, we have for number 1 is the renal pelvis, number 2, the renal artery, number 3, the renal vein, number 4, the ureter, number 5, the medulla, number 6, the major calyx, number 7, we have the cortex, number 8 is the minor calyx. For the right picture, we have number 9, the cortex, number 10, the medulla, number 11, the renal papilla rather, number 12, the renal corpuscle, number 13 is the renal tubule, and number 14 is the collecting duct. Nephron, number 1, we have letter A. Nephron are the structural and blank units of the kidney. The answer is functional. Letter B, each nephron consists of 2 major parts called the blank and the blank. The answer is the renal corpuscle and the renal tubule. Number 2, we have a renal corpuscle consists of a capillary network called the blank, which is surrounded by blank, the expanded end of a renal tubule. The answer is glomerulus and Bowman's capsule. Number 3, we have letter A. Blood enters the glomerulus from an blank arteriole and leaves the glomerulus by way of an blank arteriole. The answer is afferent and efferent arterioles. Letter B. Which of these arterioles has the smaller diameter? The answer is efferent arteriole. Number 4, we have letter A. The inner layer of Bowman's capsule is made of cells called podocytes and is very permeable because it has pores. Letter B. The outer layer of Bowman's capsule has no pores and is not permeable. Letter C. The fluid that enters Bowman's capsule from the glomerulus is called renal filtrate. Number 5,
Number the parts of the renal tubule in the order that renal filtrate flows through them. So, first, it goes to proximal convoluted, second, loop of Henle, third, distal convoluted tubule, and lastly, to the collecting tubule. Number 6, collecting tubules unite to form a papillary duct that empties urine into a calyx of the renal pelvis. Number 7, the blood vessels that surround all of the parts of a renal tubule are called the peritubular capillaries, and they carry blood that has come from an efferent arteriole. Formation of urine glomerular filtration. Number 1. Glomerular filtration takes place in which major part of the nephron? The answer is the renal corpuscle. Number 2, we have letter A. In the glomerular filtration, blood pressure forces plasma dissolved substances and small proteins out of the blood in glomerulus and into Bowman's capsule. Letter B. The fluid in Bowman's capsule is now called renal filtrate. Letter C. The components of blood that remain in the blood are large proteins and blood cells because they are too large to be forced out of the glomerulus. Number 3, we have letter A. Are useful materials such as nutrients and minerals present in renal filtrate? The answer is yes. Useful materials such as nutrients and minerals are present in renal filtrate. Letter B. Are waste products present in renal filtrate? The answer again is yes. Letter C. Therefore, glomerular filtration is selective in terms of size. Anything small or dissolved in blood plasma may enter the filtrate. Letter D. Renal filtrate, therefore, is very similar to the blood plasma from which it is made, except that there is little proteins and no blood cells in filtrate. Number 4, letter A. The glomerular filtration rate is the amount of renal filtrate formed by the kidneys in 1 minute and is about 100 to 125 ml per minute. Letter B. If blood flow through the kidneys decreases, the GFR will decrease. Letter C. If blood flows through the kidneys increases, the GFR will increase. The part 4 of the worksheet. And again, I am your reporter, TRISHA BAUTISTA, to discuss the anatomy of the reproductive system under the gross anatomy of the human male reproductive system. Proceeding to number 1, we have to enlist the two principal functions of the testes. The true principal function of the testes is to produce sperm and testosterone. Number 2, we need to identify all indicated structures of portions or structures on the diagrammatic view of the male reproductive system. For the right side, we have urinary bladder, vas deferens, spongy urethra, erectile tissue, penis, erectile tissue again, glans penis, and for the left side, seminal vesicle, ejaculatory duct, prostate glands, bulbourethral gland, seminiferous tubules, and testis. On number 3, how might enlargement of the prostate interfere with urination or the man's reproductive ability? We have the constriction of the urethra. At that point may present passage of urine or semen. Number 4, match the terms in column B to the descriptive statements in column A. For the copulatory organ penetrating device, we have the penis. Testis is for producing sperm. Ductus deferens for duct conveying sperm to the ejaculatory duct in the spermatic cord. Number 4, we have penile urethra, a urine and a semen conduit. Number 5, sperm maturation site, which is the epididymis. Moving on to number 6, location of the testes in adult males can be found in scrotum. Who's the gland side? Prepuce. Number 8, portion of the urethra between the prostate and the penis. We have the membranous urethra. Number 9, seminal gland that empties a secretion into the prostrate urethra. Number 10, bulbogland urethral empties a secretion into the membranous urethra. So number 5, why are the testes located in the scrotum? Well, the testis is located in the scrotum because it provides a slightly cooler temperature necessary for sperm production. So it's important that it's located in the scrotum because it's the only part that is cooler for sperm reproduction. Number 6, describe the composition of semen and name all structures contributing to its formation. Sperm and the secretions of the prostrate, the seminal glands also containing the bulbourethral gland or the fructus. Number 7, of what importance is the fact that seminal fluid is alkaline? Well, it buffers the sperm against the acidic environment of the female reproductive tract. That's why that's why the fact that seminal fluid is alkaline. Number 8. Using the following terms, trace the pathway of sperm from the testis to the urethra. Red testis, epididymis, semiferous, tubule, ductus, and deferens. First, let's start from the semiferous tubule. Second is red testis, followed up by epididymis, and the last is ductus deferens. Let's proceed to the female reproductive system, which is the gross anatomy of female reproductive system. Number 9, below the diagram of a frontal section of a portion of the female reproductive system, identify all indicated structures. So let's start from the right side. Fundus of uterus pointed at the top layer. Fund ligament of uterus, cervical canal, vagina, pointing out in the last side. And the fallopian tube in the center, broad ligament mesosalpinx, ovarian ligament. In left side, we have suspensory ligament, fimbriae, ovary, ureter, and lastly, the broad ligament mesometrium. Mesometrium. Okay, number 10, we have the uterus. Uterus is for the site of fetal development. Number 2, we have the copulatory canal, which is the vagina. Number 3, fertilized egg typical for form here, which is the fallopian tube where the fertile egg is formed. The clitoris where it becomes erectile during sexual excitement for the girls. We have duct extending superolaterally from the uterus with the uterine tube. Number 6, the ovary produces eggs, estrogens, and progesterone. Number 7, which is the last part of number 10, is the fimbriae, finger-like ends of the uterine tube. And number 11, name the structures composing the external genitals or vulva of the female. Where? Well, we have the mons pubis, labia majora, labia minora, clitoris, urethral vaginal office, greater vestibular glands. Okay, number 12. Put the following vestibular perineal structures in their proper order from an anterior to the posterior aspect: vagina, office, anus, urethral opening, and clitoris. Well, the the order, we need to start from the clitoris, follow up by urethral opening, and second to the last, the vaginal office, and lastly, the anus. That is the order of the proper anterior to posterior aspect of our vagina. Number 13. Name the male structure that is homologous to the female structure named below. Well, we have the labia majora, which is for boys, which is called scrotum, clitoris for the girls, for the boys we have penis, ovaries for the girls or women, and testes for the boys or men. Okay. 14. Assume a couple has just consummated the sex act and the man's sperm have been deposited in the woman's vagina. Trace the pathway of the sperm through the female reproductive tract. Okay, let's start. Vagina, cervical canal, from the lumen of uterus. Next, fallopian tube, and to the infundibulum fibrae. Okay. Number 15, define ovulation. The release of an oocyte from the surface of the ovary. For that is the last part, the end of the human reproductive system. That's all. Thank you.
As part of anatomy and reproductive system, microscopic anatomy of selected male and female reproductive organ. For number 16, the testis is divided into a number of lobes by a connective tissue. Each of these lobes contains 1 to 4 tightly coiled seminiferous tubules which converge on a tubular region called the epididymis. Number 17. On the diagram showing the sagittal section of the human testis, correctly identify all the structures provided with the leader lines. So we have on the right the spermatic cord, the blood vessels, and the nerves, head of epididymis, lobule, rete testis, tunica albuginea, septum, and on the left we have the ductus vas deferens and the body of epididymis. Number 18. In the female reproductive system, what is a follicle? It is the structural and functional unit of the ovary. It is composed of the ovarian follicles, oocytes, an immature egg, and a graphene or a vesicular follicle, which is a mature egg. Next is how are primary and vesicular follicles anatomically different. For the primary follicles, one or small numbers of follicles surrounding the oocyte. Vesicular follicles has a large antrium containing fluid produced by granule cells developing oocytes. And what is a corpus luteum? It is a yellow endocrine body formed in the ovary in the site of a ruptured vesicular follicle immediately after ovulation. It, it secretes progesterone and estrogen. For number 19, what hormones are produced by the corpus luteum? We have the progesterone.
Digestive part, clinical application. Number 1, Mrs. L is 50 years old and has been feeling pain in the upper right abdominal quadrant after eating. Her doctor suspects that Mrs. L has stones in which accessory organ of digestion? The answer is gallbladder. Number 1B, such stones are usually made of what substance? And the answer is cholesterol. Number 1C, if gallstones are producing frequent and severe pain, the most effective procedure is to remove the gallbladder surgically. Number 2A, Mr. A is 67 years old and has been hospitalized with diverticulitis. Diverticula are small outpouchings of the weakened wall of the colon. and they may become inflamed if bacteria become trapped within them. For number 2B, Mr. A is being treated with antibiotics to prevent further infection and the need of surgery. Number 3A, Mr. F has been diagnosed with hepatitis A. He feels very fatigued, has no appetite, and the whites of his eyes appears to be yellow. This number 3B, this color caused by excess bilirubin in the blood, which Mr. F's damaged liver cannot excrete rapidly. Mr. F asks his doctor what causes hepatitis and how he got it. Number 3C, the doctor tells him that hepatitis is caused by a virus and that hepatitis A is usually spread from a person to person by contaminated food or water. Number 4, name the digestive disorder suggested by each of these descriptions. Number 4.1, a 6-month-old baby boy often vomits after his feeding. The answer is pyloric stenosis. Number 2, a 40-year-old woman feels abdominal discomfort after eating foods that contain milk. The answer is lactose intolerance. Number 3, a very serious infection that may follow a ruptured appendix or a perforated ulcer. The answer is peritonitis. For deep dive urinary part clinical applications, number 1, urinary tract infections are usually caused by what microorganism? The answer is Escherichia coli or E. coli. Number 1B, these microorganisms are usually part of the normal flora of the person's own gastrointestinal tract. Number 1C, the term nephritis refers to an infection of the kidney. Number 1D, the term ascites refers to infection of the bladder. Number 2, Mrs. R has been diagnosed with renal calculi, which may also be called kidney stones. Number 2B, to prevent further formation of stones, Mrs. R will be advised to increase her intake of fluids. Number 2C, this will be important to have her kidney form a dilute urine. Number 3, Mr. G was in a car accident and lost a great deal of blood. He has been in the intensive care unit for 24 hours and his condition is stable. His doctor, however, is concerned about his possible kidney damage and finds these reports about Mr. G urinary output in 24 hours is 500 ml. Blood area nitrogen is elevated. Blood creatinine level is elevated. On the basis of this information, is Mr. G's kidney functioning normally? No, because the normal range of urine output in 24 hours is 800 to 2000 ml. His BUN level is elevated, which can indicate low blood flow to the kidney caused by dehydration or heart failure. And his blood creatinine level is also elevated, which can signify impaired kidney function or kidney disease. Number 3B, is Mr. G in total renal failure? Give a reason to support your answer. No. For us to consider a total renal failure, Mr. G must be experiencing swelling of legs, ankle, and feet from retention of fluids, excessive drowsiness, or fatigue and seizure. The client only showed one early sign of kidney failure, and that is decreased urinary output. Number 4, for each of these possible causes of renal failure, state whether it is re- renal, perennial, intrinsic renal, or postrenal. Number 1, a kidney stone is blocking a ureter. It is postrenal. An extensive bacterial infection of the kidney. The answer is intrinsic renal. A ureter becomes twisted. The answer is postrenal. Severe hemorrhage, prerenal. A serious side effect of some antibiotics. The answer is intrinsic renal. For number 4B, for someone with chronic renal failure, the procedure called dialysis may be life-saving. 4C, in this procedure, the patient's blood is passed through an hemodialysis machine to remove waste and excess water. That's all.
5. Reproductive system. Number 1. Mr. C is 68 years old and tells his doctor that he is having increasing difficulty urinating. A possible cause of this is enlargement of the prostate gland. B. The enlargement is called the prostatic hypertrophy. Letter C. The condition may make urination difficult because the prostate gland surround the first inch of the urethra. For number 2, Mr. and Mrs. D ask their doctor for the most effective method of birth control. The doctor tells Mrs. D that the surgical procedure of tubular ligation would be very effective. In this procedure, the fallopian tubes are cut and tied. Letter C. The doctor tells Mr. D that the surgical procedure called a vasectomy is very effective method of contraception. In this procedure, the ductus deferens are cut and tied off. Number 3. Sexually transmitted diseases or STDs are infectious disease that are spread from person to person by sexual activity. The STD that is caused by bacterium and if untreated may have a serious or even fatal effects on the heart or the nervous system is syphilis. B. One of the most prevalent SIDs in the United States is chlamydial infection. Chlamydia is a type of bacteria. Letter C. Women in these infections are at greater risk of ectopic pregnancy. The infants born to these infected women are the risk of developing conjunctivitis or pneumonia. The STD, genital herpes, is caused by a virus. Letter F. Newborn who acquire this herpes infection from their mothers during birth are at higher risk for damage to the nervous system or even to death. Number 4. A breast cancer can often be successfully treated if detected early. A detection method that a woman can do to themselves is breast self-examination. B. A procedure that can detect a very small tumors and that is recommended for older women is mammography.
For the endocrine, let's start from the gland, the adrenal, hormone, adrenal medulla, the epinephrine, adrenal cortex, aldosterone, glucocorticoids, and sex hormones. The target organ or organs are heart, bronchioles, and blood vessels. For the response and function, epinephrine acts with the sympathetic nervous system to produce the fight or flight response to stressors, while the aldosterone, it regulates water and electrolyte balance in the extracellular fluids, mainly by regulating sodium ion reabsorption by kidney tubules. For the endocrine, let's start from the gland, the adrenal, hormone, adrenal medulla, the epinephrine, adrenal cortex, aldosterone, glucocorticoids, and sex hormones. The target organ or organs are heart, bronchioles, and blood vessels. For the response and function, epinephrine acts with the sympathetic nervous system to produce the fight or flight response to stressors, while the aldosterone, it regulates water and electrolyte balance in the extracellular fluids, mainly by regulating sodium ion reabsorption by kidney tubules. While the glucocorticoids, it help the body to resist long-term stress, and sex hormones are produced throughout life in relatively insignificant amounts. Epinephrine is stimulated by strong emotions such as anger or fear. Aldosterone, increase in plasma angiotensin 2, and glucocorticoids rather, is stimulated by ACTH or adrenocorticotropic hormone, released in anterior pituitary. And for the sex hormones, is stimulated by luteinizing hormone LH and follicle stimulating hormone or FSH. Epinephrine, epinephrine rather, epinephrine is inhibited by nitrates. The aldosterone is inhibited by potassium depletion. The glucocorticoids, cortisol, sex hormones is the pituitary gland. The hyper secretion rather of epinephrine is pheochromocytoma, and for the aldosterone is the hypertension and hypokalemia, and for the glucocorticoids, the Cushing's disease. For the sex hormones is the hypergonadism. For the hyposecretion, epinephrine has abnormally high blood pressure. The aldosterone is hypoaldosteronism or dehydration, low blood pressure, a low blood sodium level, and high potassium level. And for the glucocorticoids rather, hypoglycemia and fasting. And for the sex hormones is the hypogonadism. Next is the thymus gland, and the hormone is thymosin, and the target organ is white blood cells, and the function is it helps direct the maturation of a unique population of white blood cells called T lymphocytes or T cells. Then it is stimulated by disease-fighting T cells, and it is inhibited by thymus gland, and its hypersecretion, its immune system goes into overdrive and lessens its efficiency. Then the hyposecretion is underperformed and is weakened. Then for the pancreas, we have insulin and glucagon. Their target organ is liver and kidney. So for the insulin, it decreases blood sugar levels, accelerating the uptake of glucose into the body cells. For the glucagon, it increases blood sugar levels, stimulates the liver to break down its glycogen stores to glucose and to release the glucose to the blood. So the insulin rather is stimulated by glucose, and the glucagon is stimulated by low blood glucose, protein-rich meals, and adrenaline. Then insulin is inhibited by somatostatin, both insulin and glucagon rather. And the hypersecretion of insulin is increased ingestive behavior through decreased blood glucose. And for the glucagon rather, the hypersecretion is the pathogenesis of type 2 diabetes. Then the hyposecretion of insulin is diabetes insipidus, and for glucagon is hypoglycemia. For the parathyroid, we have the parathyroid hormone or PTH, and its target organ is bone and kidneys. And the function is the most vital regulator of calcium phosphate ion homeostasis of the blood. It releases calcium from bone matrix and prods the kidney to reabsorb more calcium and less phosphate from the filtrate. So, it is stimulated by serum ionized calcium concentration through negative feedback, and it is inhibited by negative feedback of calcium levels in the blood to the parathyroid glands. So the hypersecretion of PTH is hyperparathyroidism, and for the hyposecretion is hypoparathyroidism. So pineal rather. The hormone is melatonin, and the target organ is brain. So, for the pituitary gland, we have the posterior, the oxytocin. For the pituitary gland, we have the posterior, the oxytocin, antidiuretic hormone or ADH, and for the anterior, we have growth hormone, FSH, LH, ACTH, TSH, and PRL or prolactin. So the target organs is ovaries, testes, brain, skin. For the pituitary gland, for the pituitary gland, we have the posterior, the oxytocin, antidiuretic hormone or ADH, and for the anterior, we have growth hormone, FSH, LH, ACTH, TSH, and PRL or prolactin. So the target organs is ovaries, testes, brain, skin, muscles and bones, uterus and mammary glands, and kidneys. So for the posterior, we have the oxytocin. It stimulates powerful uterine contractions during birth and causes milk ejection in the lactating mother. And for the ADH rather, is it causes the kidney to reabsorb more water from the forming urine rather, thereby reducing urine output, conserving body water, and increasing blood pressure. For the anterior, we have the growth hormone. It stimulates growth and bone formation, egg release, regulates the endocrine activity of the cortex, portion of the adrenaline gland, influences the growth and activity of the thyroid gland, stimulates breast development, and promotes and maintains milk production by the mother's breast after childbirth. So, oxytocin is stimulated by estrogen, and the ADH is stimulated by decreases in blood and volume. Then for the growth hormone, it is stimulated by sleep, stress, exercise, and low glucose levels in blood. And for the FSH is the GnRH, and LH is the adrenal cortex. The ACTH is the thyrotropin releasing hormone, and for the thyroid stimulating hormone is the hypothalamus. Then oxytocin is inhibited by catecholamines, and for the ADH, it is inhibited by atrial natriuretic peptide. And for the growth hormone is the somatostatin rather. Then the FSH is the estradiol rather. LH is the estrogen, and ACTH is the glucocorticoids, and thyroid stimulating or TSH, high blood levels of thyroid hormones. Then prolactin is dopamine. The hypersecretion of oxytocin is affectionate to their children, female, and prostatic hyperplasia for male. And for the ADH is the syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormone secretion. Then for the growth hormone is gigantism. Then for the FSH, infertility, menstrual difficulties, low sex drive in men, and early or delayed puberty. For the LH is infertility and miscarriage. For the ACTH is the Cushing's disease. For the TSH is weight gain, decreased heart rate with an abnormal rhythm, then a decreased body temperature. And for the prolactin is cause production of breast milk in men and women who is not pregnant or breastfeeding. For the hyposecretion is oxytocin, autism and autistic spectrum disorders, and ADH, diabetes insipidus, growth hormone dwarfism, FSH, poor ovarian function, LH, infertility, ACTH, Cushing syndrome, TSH, weight loss, heat tolerance, fast heartbeat, high blood pressure, and other symptoms. Then PRL is insufficient breast milk after giving birth. For the thyroid gland, we have thyroid hormones and calcitonin. So the target organ or organs is most tissues, heart, CNS, autonomic nervous system, bone, and lungs. So its function is to control rate of body metabolism and cellular oxidation. It affects every cell rather in the body. And calcitonin, it decreases blood calcium levels by stimulating calcium deposits in the bones. So thyroid hormones is stimulated by TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, and calcitonin is stimulated by increase in the serum calcium concentration. And thyroid hormones is inhibited by TSH and TRH, while calcitonin is inhibited by somatostatin. For the hypersecretion of thyroid hormones is the hyperthyroidism, and for the calcitonin is the medullary thyroid cancer. For the hyposecretion of thyroid hormones is the hypothyroidism or depression, and calcitonin is no clinical effect on the body.